Let's see, I've got the stream manager pulled up for the first time, which will hopefully help. It looks good. Let me pull it up on my phone just to test the audio. Oh boy. It's gonna go great. It sounds good.
All right.
And just waiting for our viewers.
Okay. Is this going to be recorded?
Yeah, so it is recorded. Um, and that's on Twitch for like a little bit. And then if you're comfortable, I'll put it on our YouTube channel after.
Sure. Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I am going
Wow,
to be reading
we have a
some
lot of
notes.
viewers. We have 45 viewers. That's our most.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Okay, let's get started.
yeah. All right.
Wow, thank you everyone for joining us for the Kaiser system with Michael Mason. Super excited for this. It has been a long time coming. And I just want to make a little plug up top that we want to do more programming like this. And doing programming like this does close off funding opportunities in Tulsa, let's say. And so we started a Patreon page to support the activity we are doing here. And so I'm going to put that in the chat. And we would love if, instead of asking for $5 suggested donation for our events, if people would subscribe for $5 a month. That would be a huge support. And the other thing is, if you haven't tuned into 91.1 Kano Radio, the pulse of Tulsa, we are streaming 24/7, and there are shows every day and night. Um, we have DJ Swan has a show right after this at 8 p.m. and then DJ Sir Mike at 10. And yeah, we hope you check it out. And if anyone wants to host a show, please let us know. It's open to everyone. And there's the Patreon link. And without further ado, here's Michael Mason. So Michael's going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So if you have questions, please leave it in the chat, and we'll get to that later. Okay, I'm out of here. Thank you,
All right.
Michael.
All right. You're welcome. All right. Thank you, Lucas, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this article with everyone. My name is Michael Mason. I'm a local writer and journalist. I also want to say hi to my wife and kids at home and to all the kids who are watching tonight. So, what is the Kaiser system? Well, for the sake of this talk, basically, I'm just going to use that as shorthand for uh, all of the organizations that are deeply connected to the Tulsa business person known as George Kaiser. Um, for tonight's talk, I'll be focusing primarily just on the George Kaiser Family Foundation and the Bank of Oklahoma Financial Corporation. There are a lot of other organizations affiliated with George Kaiser, but we may not have time to get to too many of them. Before we get into my article, though, I would like to spend a few minutes kind of trying to understand the perspective of those within the Kaiser system, and try to fathom, like, why would any of us bother to spend a Friday evening concerned with all of these organizations that are really just trying to help Tulsa out. um, so, you know, through all of these organizations, I think you could build a pretty strong argument that Tulsans are generally wealthier as a result of it. And what do I mean by that? Well, Like you can go downtown or to the gathering place, and you'll see all these brand new beautiful buildings, and you can impress your friends, and you can meet artists from all over the country, and you can network, and when Tulsa looks good, you look good, and you appear to be thriving. um, there are also an incredible amount of new projects and activities for Tulsans. Just take two, for example, the Woody Guthrie archives and the Bob Dylan archives. I mean, it's kind of a message, that these are two figures of the anti-establishment, and it's almost like um, you know Kaiser's people are telling us, hey, we are all, we're part of this together too. We're in this, and we think that Woody and Bob Dylan are really cool, and check them out, listen to their message. um, Tulsa is also enjoying this extremely unusual circumstance where these enormous amounts of philanthropic dollars are all being focused on it rather than being spread all over the world. Like a lot of billionaires are giving to causes that are all over the country or in different nations, but George Kaiser has chosen to focus all of his, or the majority of his giving, on Tulsa. That compelled an editorialist at the Tulsa World to write, every Tulsan should get down on their knees every day and thank God for George Kaiser. I mean, that's the kind of enthusiasm and gratitude um, that the Kaiser Foundation and the Kaiser system engenders in Tulsa. Kaiser also hires some of the smartest, most connected people in the country. Ken Levitt, the head of the Kaiser Foundation, is this like he's this he's got a mind like lightning. He's quick witted. He's funny. He's passionate. If you send an email to Ken Levitt, he'll respond to you with like a link about something really cool going on in Tulsa. You've got people like Phil Lakin and Jeff Stava that are these like, they're super bros who are masters at getting things done no matter how hard. And if you've ever met any of their program managers, generally these are really kind, concerned, compassionate, well-meaning people. Um, I've spent about 5 years studying the Kaiser system, and I've learned a lot from them. I've learned about the power of teamwork. I've learned how effective centralized control can be. That, by the way, is centralized control is one of Kaiser's favorite management styles. Um, so he says, and that's opposite of more distributed styles of management. And so they both of these styles have their pros and cons. Um, the other thing that has impressed me about the Kaiser system is how they relentlessly steer this positive narrative about Tulsa. It's almost like their Tulsa is kind of this city on a shining city on a hill. So why would anyone in their right mind criticize a group of people who are all trying to do good and help everyone? And my argument is that any social critic uh, has to be an incredible optimist, because not only do they have to believe that they're seeing something worth addressing, but that they believe that something could possibly get done about it. When we don't have any social criticism happening, we have a kind of a resigned culture. We have people who are kind of either disengaged, disinterested, negligent, or worse, they could feel hopeless or helpless or anything like that. So anytime someone offers a criticism, we should consider why they're doing that. I don't think criticism necessarily always has to come from anger or negativity, but rather a faith that saying something might lead to betterment for all of us. So with that, I'll begin. Talking about these concerns that I have about the Kaiser system. Um, One of the things that I want to be very, very clear about is that my article is about criticizing the system and not any particular individuals. What I think is important to understand is that with a complex system, all of these attributes and values and uh, you know other things come out of the system almost unintentionally. Yes, they do have human actors that exhibit these things, but I don't think that they are uh, intentional, and I don't think that there's necessarily any malice or ill will involved. Um, One of the things that I noticed is just how much decision making is being conducted by people employed within the Kaiser system. We're talking about thousands of Tulsans, so it shouldn't surprise anybody. But if you read my article, you'll understand that um, they are, weighing in on, have a huge influence on the arts, the economy, politics, business, education, just about every area of public life in Tulsa, they have a very strong voice and presence in. And what I'm arguing is that because these employees are all part of the same larger system, they tend to favor the values that the Kaiser system promulgates. And sometimes those values could, result in, you know, problems. Like one of the things that I notice is that the system has a lot of paradoxes inherent in it. Uh, Take, for example, the Bank of Oklahoma that I mentioned earlier. Every year, it makes tens of millions of dollars from overdraft fees. And we know that overdraft fees brutalize the poor. Wealthy people don't suffer overdraft fees because they always have some money in their account, but poor people bear the brunt of it. And the Bank of Oklahoma has been sued several times because of their overdraft fees. Um, so you have one organization that is known to harm poor people, while you have the George Kaiser Family Foundation, on the other hand, that's trying to intervene in the cycle of poverty. And so you have, the left hand doing something that the right hand is doing differently, and that is one of the paradoxes that I try to illuminate in my article. That I don't know how you reconcile these things, but it's worth asking the question, because someday the George Kaiser Family Foundation is going to become the majority shareholder of the Bank of Oklahoma. And so I think these are opportunities to create integrity in that system. Let's see. Now, the Kaiser Foundation is aware that people are concerned about it, and are asking a lot of questions. And so some time ago, they set up a forum called Coffees with Ken. That's Ken Levitt, the director, where anyone's invited to come in and speak up at those meetings about any concerns you have. And I don't honestly know whether those meetings have been effective, but I've been to one of them and I learned a lot. And one of the things that I noticed ties into a very consistent theme that I experienced while conducting this article. And it was the theme of fear. Like people employed by Kaiser or people affected by the Kaiser system have a lot of fear about speaking up and criticizing and saying what they truly feel about certain things. And a lot of people worried that they could lose funding or this or that. And so many organizations in town are reliant on a harmonious relationship with the Kaiser system that they just get completely disincentivized to question any of its decisions at all. So this fear that permeates the Kaiser system isn't exclusive to the Kaiser system. I think it's almost embedded in the cultural fabric of Tulsa because if you look at it, the city itself has been afraid of talking about the race massacre. It took almost a century for us to start really dealing with this in a public dialogue kind of way. So um, so that that fear was a consistent theme. There are a lot of other areas that my article goes into, and I invite you to check it out in detail to understand the intricacies of the system. But what I would like to do now is talk a little bit about what's happened with the Kaiser system since my article came out. If you recall, like back in March, uh, Elon Musk, made a tweet about how he was looking for a place in the middle of the country to put a new plant for Tesla Motors. And if you were watching the news in Tulsa, it was like suddenly there was this grassroots campaign by all these Tulsa creatives that were screaming to get Elon to Oklahoma. Somebody created a really funny Twitter feed called Big Fucking Field, and then all of a sudden these Tesla videos started rolling out, and it all culminated when a bunch of people showed up in front of the Golden Driller, and they revealed that he had this new face job, which looked like Elon Musk. And of course, if you were paying attention on social media, it was kind of a train wreck because it was like an embarrassment to a lot of Tulsans who felt like one of their symbols of their city was desecrated, for the sake of seducing a billionaire's attention. And ultimately, Elon passed on Tulsa, and the plant went to Austin. But what I would like you all to do is take a look at the links that Lucas is going to provide to you, and I want to invite you to do your own research and figure out for yourself, like, what do you think went on behind the scenes? Like, how did the Tulsa for Tesla campaign actually happen? You'll see a link for Small Girls PR up in New York City, and you'll notice that the Kaiser Foundation is one of their clients. They engage in things like news hijacking, and they're really good at placing articles in really prominent places like the New York Times or the Verge. And then you'll notice that there's a Verge article about this creative guy in Tulsa who's seemed to come up with the idea of the golden Elon thing on his own. And then suddenly there's another character, Michael Bosch of Atento Capital, which is another Kaiser system organization, and he forms something called Tulsa for Tesla. And then you know uh, you know all of this stuff. And what you'll see is a lot of behind the scenes activity, but what you never see publicly is Kaiser's people talking about their role in influencing that conversation. And this is another criticism I have of the Kaiser system is this sort of tendency towards this lack of transparency that, I don't know why, for example, they were not very public about their involvement with the Tulsa for Tesla campaign. Uh, maybe they're like the rest of us. They're afraid of failing in public or something like that. But the reason I wanted you to see these links and the PR machine is that so you could understand a little bit about how the Kaiser system coordinates with the media to do its messaging. And you realize how much work and effort and strategy goes into things like Kaiser's recent op-ed that he wrote to the Tulsa World, where he told the Tulsa World that he thought that Mayor Bynum should leave the Black Lives Matters logo on the street in Greenwood, and uh, and so I hope you look at these kind of messages through the lens of this uh, bigger system at work, and you start to see how things get moved around and get influenced in Tulsa. Um, there are a lot of other ways that the Kaiser system interacts with our community, and so what I'd like to do at this point is go ahead and respond to some of your questions about the article or about things that you've noticed about the Kaiser system in the community. Lucas, are you ready?
Yes, I am. There I am. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so everyone, please, there's a lot to talk about, lots of questions, but please leave them in the chat. Um, yeah, certainly your article, like every paragraph is, it's like a summary, or almost an anthology or something. Like every paragraph feels like it can be a whole story and expand. There's so much going on there. And so yeah, I encourage people who have read it and like have specific aspects they want to talk about. Lucas, turn your sound up. Sorry, there we go. I turned my sound up. Um, Debasing, shameful the way they tried to sell Tulsa weirdo face paint on the Golden Driller, and we were very excited to get some coverage of our program about that. Anyways, one thing I
Yeah,
wanted
I
to
did.
ask.
I did want to also mention that you got the Daily Beast did some coverage of the artist's viewpoint of the Golden Elon thing,
Right.
and I think that was a little more accurate of an article. But you should read both the Verge version of what happened in Tulsa and the Daily Beast version, and judge for yourself.
Um, and I think one thing I kind of wanted to ask you about, and I mentioned earlier, was and I'm forgetting the name again, but that
The Tulsa Community Foundation, I believe.
yes, and so
Yeah.
just kind of if you could talk a bit about how the Tulsa Community Foundation operates in Tulsa, because I feel like that is a really concrete example of how philanthropy in particular is concentrated, and this idea of like what happens when you centralize how the Gkff facilitates the centralization of control and maybe power.
Yeah, well, the Tulsa Community Foundation is, I mean, it's a really complex financial instrument, in my opinion, anyways. The director of it is Phil Lakin, who is also a Tulsa city councilor. And it's a very large donor advised fund. And that means that A lot of wealthy Tulsans contribute into it, and by creating this, pool of donors, uh, they can anonymize their giving, and it's their privilege to do that. But what ends up happening is that the Tulsa Community Foundation then dispenses those dollars to local organizations that may not know where their contributions are coming from. And so, a lot of local organizations critique it because they feel like it distances them from their donor base, um, and makes it harder for them to seek funding, especially if those organizations are not approved by the Tulsa Community Foundation. There's a lot of other criticisms about Tulsa Community Foundation that I articulate in my article, but that's just one of the complexities of dealing with a massive donor advised fund here in the community.
Um, okay, so we're getting some questions coming in. Are there examples of GKFF cutting off grant recipients for criticism? Is the fear grounded in experience? I can say yes, that has happened to me and to other people I know. Why Tesla? Seems were more than a few reasons why it wouldn't be beneficial for Tulsans already here. Yet all this covert work went into play to make something not even come to fruition. Not expecting you to have answers here, but it's more than odd. Sounds like something a municipality would fall for, but not a hub of expertise and talent.
Well, that raises a really interesting question, which is why did the Kaiser Foundation get involved in all at all when this is really the job of the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce? Now, I think I think there were efforts to make it look as though the Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce was steering that conversation. Um, but again, I invite you to look at the links provided and make your own determination and see what you think.
Um, Someone says that they think the paradox, scare quotes, of perpetuating poverty via BOK overdraft fees and ameliorating the same with GKFF TCF in a sense ensures work for the latter. It's almost like sowing and harvesting. And also just add that um, I really appreciate how you introed to uh, your talk in terms of like why someone who isn't coming from a place of anger would be interested in critiquing GKFF. I know a lot of us are coming from places of anger, but I think it's valuable to see why it's can be a good, just not. Anyways,
Yeah, I mean, I think that anger can be helpful when it's, appropriately steered, and yet it can be injurious if it's blind. You know, I could have written a sort of Matt Taibbi style, vitriolic takedown, but that wasn't at all my intention. I think it's important for you know if you're criticizing an organization like the Kaiser system, I think it's important for people within the system to hear you just as much as people outside the system. And I believe that it really had a big effect on people within the system. I did get a lot of emails following the article, thanking me and that kind of thing. But um, you know, overall, it seemed to stimulate a lot of dialogue in the community. One of the more recent comments that I really appreciated is that someone told me that within their organization, it just felt like this collective sigh of relief that finally someone had, pointed to the problem.
um, so someone's Julie's asking about the arts ecology of Tulsa in relation to the system. TAF brings a lot of artists in, but few stay long term. Meanwhile, the arts at TU were recently gutted at a university which many include in the system. And I'll also say that we definitely have plans here at OK, #1 to get uh, go more specifically into Kaiser's relationships to kind of the arts in Tulsa because I think that's a huge subject. But
Well, yeah, as you well know, it's problematic. They've had a lot of struggles pulling off the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. They're, on the one hand, you could argue, well, artists are difficult people by nature, and they're never going to be satisfied. Blah blah blah. Um, on the other hand, man, your heart breaks when you hear these actual stories, coming from artists. I mean, several of them, cried in my presence about how hard the fellowship was on them. I go into detail on it in my article, but um, I think it's having a real, you know, challenging effect on the local art scene because, uh, I think a lot of local artists had hoped that, they would somehow be raised up and invited into this kind of collective, promulgation of the local arts and culture. And, what people have discovered is that, um, that can happen only first if your values align with those of the Kaiser system. And then, if they don't align, you're really disincentivized to produce art outside of that. And so, um, that's a real, you know, constraint on a lot of artists. And, and so, the other I would say argument about the Kaiser system that I think is really valid is that when you have this much concentration of decision making, um, you homogenize the art that does get put out into the world, and it has a certain feel to it and a certain flavor. And um, and so you end up censoring inadvertently by exclusion and omission and neglect. And I know of many, many, many and disenfranchised artist who is really frustrated by this aspect.
and just we have some excellent questions coming in, but just to get to the other end of that question was the TU kind of takeover. I mean, so Janet Levitt, Ken Levitt's wife, was the became the provost of TU. I think she was like the first provost to not have a doctorate or something like that. And yeah, and so that the MFA program and the liberal arts are being cut in this very deliberately seeming manner, while on the other end, again, you have this like slash and give dynamic where meanwhile they're doing the fellowship and this activity downtown.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, the way that I see the TU thing is that, you have all of these geniuses of accumulation from, the Bank of Oklahoma, these very business-minded people who want, economic activity and development. And so they, you know, got into a real position of strength over TU through the Bank of Oklahoma and a big position of influence. And they were able to really steer it and reshape it into uh, an academic institution that would satisfy a lot of these larger objectives, like, you know uh, being bent towards bringing a cybersecurity district into town. And unfortunately, the arts and the humanities don't really seem to fit in that worldview of the creators of the program. And so, you know, I think it says a lot to people about what the values are that uh, this system espouses through its actions.
Um, I really like I feel like there's a pyramid of people under Kaiser that seem to suddenly chime in this positive Tulsa, everything is fine. Yet that pyramid of people seem to be the same people the last 20 years who have kept our critical thinking uh, progress lagging for fears of negativity, and it stagnates communities, i.e., our local art scene. How many fucking blue whale art shows do we need? Tulsa fears criticism, everything is fine, not seeing that criticism allows improvement thoughts. And I'll add, yeah, I think one of the weird things about being an artist in Tulsa is that all in the arts you're taking money from like nefarious entities and billionaires, and yeah, rarely are you getting money from like someone you totally agree with. But there tends to be this understanding that by giving money to artists to do this like kind of their free speech, their critique in this ultimately like fairly harmless realm of art that doesn't actually impact like the Bank of Oklahoma, for example, uh, that is good for them to permit that level of critique. But in Tulsa, it's really bizarre to experience that the critique is so that even that small amount of critique feels dangerous, and that's where maybe we get into the fear system. Um, I want to get to this question because it's a new direction. Parents would like to have as much influence on our kids' education as Gkff TCF does. In fact, one of its employees is a school board member. Any ideas for parents dealing with this conflict of interest and disproportionate influence of Gkff on public school policies? We cannot get elected officials to address it or local media to acknowledge it. Geez, we have a lot of questions. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all these.
Boy, yeah.
Um,
This is, I mean, this is that's a big question, and a very, very difficult one. I tried to offer some suggestions in my article about really demanding accountability from the boards through, uh, you know, whole, demanding that their ethics uh, committees are strong and viable. And that's one way to kind of try to put the checks and balances on these extreme imbalances of power. But public education in Tulsa is so vulnerable right now, and this is part of the riddle that you know Kaiser and his people are trying to resolve through this charitable giving. They have a good argument in the reverse, which is you guys want us to pull all of our funding out of this thing. You know, what might happen then? So uh, I think what's important as a parent is to try to do what you can to illuminate the tendencies and the incentives that anyone in the Kaiser system may have to influence the decisions, particularly at their school. There is a whole other like article that a lot of parents have asked me to write about how um, Tulsa's wealthy steers the Tulsa public schools through involvement, at the PTA level and things like that. And I think those arguments are very valid, and It leaves a lot of parents feeling, really frustrated and resigned and all that kind of thing. Because at the end of the day, the Tulsa public school system can feel really unfair and has its own kind of class related problems. So,
Sorry, we have a lot of questions, and I'm doing a little moderation, so apologies if I don't get to everything. Could you speak about the connection between Gkff Tulsa Innovation Labs and the restart of the Tulsa Remote Program? I think this is there's a few questions about the remote worker program. I had heard, or maybe you, someone told me that this was census related. That part of the remote worker program was to bring a bunch of people to Tulsa ahead of the census. Um, Someone saying, it fills up empty luxury apartments in Tulsa. Part of the application asks if the applicant would be interested in moving into luxury buildings downtown. That's interesting.
well,
Um,
first off, I want to applaud the Kaiser system. I think it's Atento Capital that manages Tulsa Remote, for such a creative program, because I'd never expected that they would revolutionize the mail order bride industry and apply it to a city. and uh, what I imagine has to be a really difficult question in the minds of people are all the employees that were laid off at the gathering place, while tech professionals were being lured with promises of money, from the coast to come to Tulsa. And so, it's this inadvertent message that, well, we prefer one type of person succeed here in Tulsa, and we value them in a way that other employees are not valued.
I
So.
just want to say, so you did mention that probably Tulsa PR people would chime in on this chat, and so we have had a couple comments from K Willis NYC that sound very much like Tulsa PR people. One of their comments was, "I'm curious, as someone who just moved back to Oklahoma after 25 years in NYC, who, if not Kaiser, is supporting artists? What are the expectations not being met? It's such a small community here and not yet a very developed supporting arts community. From what I've seen, what am I missing? I would say read the article, and then so FYI, the remote worker program is being run in almost every state. Is that true that every state has a remote worker program?"
I
She
don't
said she's
actually
not a
know. I
Kaiser
haven't.
PR person.
Yeah, yeah. That very well could be. It wouldn't surprise me if a lot of cities are watching Tulsa to duplicate a similar program. And to me, it's fascinating, and it's an anthropological curiosity. And I have a lot of questions about it. Unfortunately, as you might imagine, very few people within the Kaiser system will talk to me about it at all, and so I have my obstacles in learning about their programs in depth. Um, but I agree, it's a fascinating phenomenon. So. Regarding that person's question in NYC regarding patrons of the arts, um, it used to be really, you know, a much more personal kind of patronage that happened here in Tulsa, say 20, 25 years ago. But I have noticed like a distinct kind of disconnection now from artists and their patrons that I think may have to do with the role of Tulsa Community Foundation. But I'm not a artist that uh, currently relies on patronage, so I'm a little disconnected from the realities of that myself. So.
Okay, apologies to Kim for calling you out. We're just stay. We I was warned ahead of time that I needed to stay vigilant for um, Tulsa PR and that subtle questions to steer the conversation. And anyways, Just because folks haven't heard of the existing music scene or art scene, yeah, I think that's a big thing you hear is that there's a lot going on in Tulsa, and when you get here, there's a lot going on.
Well, I mean,
And
there's a super exciting Tulsa that doesn't make the news, and
exactly.
it's got a really vibrant subculture. It's always been here. The people that know about it love it. They're diehard fanatics. Really incredible stuff is going on at the ground level. It's just that unfortunately, a lot of times its values don't align with the values that get publicity. So,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You talked about the homogenization that happens. We're gonna try and wrap this up at about 8, and we only have a few questions right now, so
okay.
might be good. How can Tulsa get new voices on these committees? Can you, or do you want to give details about how much money is at stake here? Is that possible for people to have any influence within the Kaiser system if they're not already?
I, you know, I think that the Kaiser system is really receptive to feedback, but whether they actually respond to it or not is a question that I have. Um, I've articulated almost all my criticisms in the article to Kaiser people before the article ever came out, and I don't think any of them, altered anything that they were doing as a result of it. Or I don't think any different decision making was made. In fact, I was encouraged by at least one of them to publish the article, as a way of uh, instigating the conversation. Uh, you know, uh, Regarding the question of what to do about the committee presence and things like that, I would encourage anyone to contact the mayor's office and request to be appointed to any of these committees first off, and given your resume and credentials and things like that. There is a challenge in that you know um, the mayor is a former lobbyist for Kaiser, and if you look at the committees, there tends to be a strong bias for Kaiser. One of the things you can do is you can do an ethics complaint about the committee in question. You can file it with the city, and you can force the ethics committee board to review that complaint. That's not saying that anything will actually get done, but with enough complaints, I have a feeling that maybe it'll cause some conversation to happen, either at the city or within the system.
Yeah, kind of on that. It seems like there's a performance of listening to feedback and no actual visible change. I think a lot of us can attest to have experienced these institutions where you ask for something and then there's like kind of this absurd
Yeah, one of
multi-year
the
long response that
yeah,
doesn't actually address anything.
right. One of the most common things that I heard was that when people voiced their concerns to people within the Kaiser system, they felt like they were commonly told, "We're already doing that," or "We've already figured that out." And what was, for me, a common habit that I felt like I heard people express is that very rarely did anyone in the Kaiser system ask people how they could help, but rather they were told how they were going to help them. That's a very big distinction. It suggests that for all the evidence-based practices, the Kaiser system could do a little bit more in asking sincere, genuine questions and responding to them in sincere and direct ways.
Someone's asking about women in recovery and Tulsa Educare, and I think maybe that gets to stuff you said at the beginning of about them doing things that are on the surface good. Uh, are overdraft fees a profit center for other banking institutions, or is it unique to be okay? It definitely is a profit center at other banking.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's a massive profit center for most large banks. Um, I don't know that most large banks have been sued as often as BOK, and I think there's the distinction. You know.
that's good. Can you talk a little bit about Tulsa news media's deference to Kaiser? Do you think your article would have been necessary had they been more critical over the years?
Um, that is a consistent complaint among just about every journalist that I've spoken with about Kaiser, is that they felt like it was impossible to write honest, critical articles about any of the Kaiser organizations. And, even the Tulsa World admitted that, in a phrase I quoted in the article, that there was a certain reluctance. They put it very diplomatically, but I'll call it downright fear that every media company that I'm aware of, and there's a lot to lose, and the fear is understandable. Um, you know, Kaiser has the system has promoted this message somehow that it is not receptive to criticism, and that uh, you know uh, it can tend to stifle conversation. So, um, I don't know. I don't know how to reconcile that, but my hope is that uh, the press would, lose its timidity and start acting with conviction and with that sort of optimism that I was talking about that comes from being a social critic. The media is a custodian of our city. And we should really uh, encourage it. Through our own efforts, like subscribing and helping it to become a subscriber driven model rather than an advertising dependent model. That's a very high bar to set and maybe wishful thinking, um, but I do think that the media could be emboldened someday.
Um, how strongly? So we have just a few minutes left. So if there's stuff we haven't gotten to, just one. This is how strongly are public elected officials in Tulsa and in Oklahoma linked to or funded by the Kaiser system? And I just have a short, quick story. Is at the Tulsa Artist Fellowship, we had a mediator assigned to us to help resolve conflicts within the fellowship, and it turned out, that it was Kaiden Creekbaum, who we later found out was a Gkff lawyer, but he was also running for state senate, and it just was kind of this absurd way of this insular way to resolve the problem by bringing in, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of Kaiser system politicians or would-be politicians. Just a quick clarification that Creek Palm is a Frederick Dorwart attorney and not a GKFF attorney that I know
Okay.
of. So, small distinction, but
Small distinction,
still,
very small
still within the
distinction,
Kaiser system. Yeah.
extremely small distinction.
Yeah.
Um, well, any last question? I thank you so much for talking to, and thank you so much for everyone who participated. I feel like this is by far our most popular talk that we've done. There's clearly a huge amount of interest in Tulsa to talk about this stuff, and yeah, there aren't very many opportunities to do that.
Yeah,
And
I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate all the people who joined in on this conversation, including all the people in the Kaiser system.
um, yeah, yeah, I think that's a good way to end. Stay tuned. Where this isn't the one and only thing we're gonna do on this subject, because it is, as we mentioned, it's like a hugely expansive subject that gets at every aspect of life in Tulsa. It's everything. It's a very all-encompassing system. So more to come. And please, 91.1 FM also streaming on okno.one, okno.one. And please check out our new Patreon page, patreon.com/okno1. We love your support.
All
And
right.
thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you guys.
Okay, ending the stream now.